Dear friends, it's indeed a pleasure to welcome all of you to the first Convocation of the 2014-2015 academic year. Under the theme, Moving Forward in Faith, during this year, through a number of events, we will be addressing the rich legacy of this school, 150 years of faithfulness, looking back with gratitude and looking forward with hope. 150 years, new faces coming in every year, new faces that then become familiar faces, friendly faces, faces which leave this place trained to be public leaders in God's service in the church and the world, faces which return, faces which are then sometimes weighed down with the burdens and the joys of ministry, but faces that continue to reflect the ministry to which you have been called, we have been called, a ministry of faithfulness. Into this rich legacy, we welcome new students some of whom have just had their first Greek class, many of whom will be having their first Introduction to Public Theology class. It must be a great feeling for all of you. And again, welcome, and we look forward to getting to know each and every one of you personally. We do have yet another new face in our midst. I'm delighted to welcome President David Lose to the first public meeting of which he is a part. In talking about the ministry of faithfulness, one of the things that we will be recollecting is who we are as a seminary. Where we came from, is the answer as simple as we came from Gettysburg? We'll find out. We'll find out. But we need to know a little more about the rich legacy that not only has shaped us as an institution, but continues to echo in who we are today. And what better person to tell us about this than Professor Dr. Karl Krueger, who serves the seminary in a variety of capacities as professor of the history of Christianity, especially the history of Christianity in North America, as the director of the Krauth Memorial Library, as the secretary of the faculty, as the keeper of the keys to certain secret rooms in the library that none of us really know about. Treasures that I suspect I won't tell you more about that. But more importantly, as the keeper of memory, as a church historian, as someone who has researched long and deep into the antecedents of Lutheranism, both in Germany and especially when Lutherans started moving into various parts of North America, through a series of distinguished publications and exhibitions, Dr. Krueger has certainly brought a long-standing passion and interest to bear on what he will be doing in a short while. We are going to hear a lecture, Scola Transplantanda, echoing a particular phrase of Muhlenberg. But at this point in time, I just want to acknowledge that you, Dr. Krueger, in gathering us at this time in this place to tell us more about who we were, what we are, and about the echoes that will accompany us into the future. You certainly represent the best of what this seminary has produced, and I especially want to greet you today as an alum of this seminary. Welcome, and we are looking forward to your lecture. I now call upon President Lose to come forward, end your remarks with prayer, following which Dr. Krueger will be lecturing to us.
Twice. Pretty good. I haven't even done anything. Well, having just been welcomed, it's my pleasure to welcome you to this opening convocation. A good friend of mine that I've taught with for a number of years gives me a hard time because I so love the origins of words, and I'm fascinated by where our words came from, and he thinks I make too much of them, and I'm sure he's right. But I'm going to email him later and say I used a word origin in opening our first convocation. And that is that word, convocation itself, which comes from the Latin convocare, which means to be called, vocare, together. And it's formally, simply calling people together. But I think for us, there's a double meaning as we realize that we are not only called as individuals, but as Dr. Day emphasized in her sermon yesterday, we are called as a community. We have a communal calling and responsibilities to each other, to our communities, and to the larger society. And I think any type of gathering that invites us to be renewed and remember that common shared calling is so very important. You may know that events like this, lectures, convocations, are diminished across our land. They are increasingly infrequent, and the attendance has been on the drop. A lot of that, of course, is because of the internet. We have so much information available to us in text and in video, and people begin to wonder, if I can watch all those great TED Talks, why should I trek all the way out to hear someone in person? I'm all for the internet and love TED Talks and other ways of receiving information, but I don't know if we've realized the risk of diminishment when we no longer gather together as a community and are reminded of our communal call and the number of bonds which draw us together beyond simply a desire to teach or learn or share information. So I hope that we continue this practice of coming together, not only to be edified and to learn, but to rejoice and to renew our identity as a people, as a community, called together for the good of this world. So Karl, thank you for formally calling us together and for reminding us of our common and shared calling. The Lord be with you. And also with you. Let us pray. Dear Lord, we give you thanks for gathering us from disparate places and calling us together as your people, as a community in this time and place that delights in teaching and learning and prayer and worship and service. Remind us again and again that as we look around and see the people gathered here, they are our brothers and sisters, and we together the body of Christ. Bless the mouth that speaks, the ears that hear, the hearts that are warmed, that we might bear witness to your redeeming love in our actions and words this day, this year, this life. In Christ's strong name we pray. Amen. Again, welcome.
LTSP, 150 years old. There were times when we never thought we would make it to this point, but we did, and it's just the beginning. And this is a story about origins and who we are at this moment and where we might head out in the future. And it has 150 years history, and it's all affected us. And I'm a part of this. I sat in this, not in this room. This was a dormitory right here. My room was on the 3rd floor. It was destroyed in order to make way for this. I'm sorry about that. But here we are, a school that was transplanted, a Scola Transplantanda. And what it is, it's about individuals. It's about issues, initiatives, and then about institutions. And as the title of the lecture refers, Scola Transplantanda, it goes back to the individual who started to pull a group of disparate congregations together to give them some organization so that they could move with an expanding frontier. Henry Melchior Muhlenberg, September 6, 1711, born in Einbeck, Hanover, fourth son of a very successful family that made shoes. And with three older brothers who were already taught to be shoemakers, the father decided, you, sir, can go to school. And so he headed off to school, but it came to an abrupt end when his father died when he was 12 years old, and he went out and worked for the next 10 years. But he read at night, and he finally, his dream came true. He was able to go to the university because of a scholarship. The University of Göttingen that opened its doors on March 19, 1735, the first class. He was a part of that. This new university in northern Germany, a gift from him, George II, King of Great Britain and Ireland. Why would a king of Great Britain and Ireland donate money for a founding of a school in Hanover? Because he was, first and foremost, the Duke of Hanover, and his duchy didn't have a university, and he was not going to be outsnooted by Tübingen or anyone else down there. He was going to found a university. And so he gave the money for the building of the University of Göttingen, for the funding of its faculty, and there was, in essence, really no North Sea. He ruled Hanover and he ruled Great Britain, Ireland simultaneously. And there it was, Henry Melchior Muhlenberg going to the university on March 19, 1735 to study theology. He finished up in 1738, and then for a year he went to Halle, the foundations of the Francas. Why? He wanted to be a missionary. He was thinking of India, and Halle had a mission training school. And so he headed off, but where did he end up? He ended up in the orphanage, teaching, administering the orphanage, thanks to Frelinghausen and Franke, and then he was working in the dispensary. So after a year of that, he decided, enough. And so he got a call to a congregation in Groß-Hennersdorf, and then he came back to Leipzig to be ordained in 1739. He went to the St. Nicholas Church, not to St. Thomas, that was on the outskirts of the city, that wasn't as prominent as the older, wealthier St. Nicholas Church, where the wealth of Leipzig was to be found. And there he was ordained to the ministry of Word and Sacrament on a Monday morning. Did Johann Sebastian Bach play for his ordination service? Might have. If the boys' choir was involved in this consistory event, Johann Sebastian Bach would have been there. Would he have been the organist at St. Nicholas? He was responsible for their music. But none of us do anything out of our job description, do we? I don't know. I think if he was called upon, he would have been there. The archives are gone, we will never know. That's one of the questions I have to ask the Almighty. You know, did Bach play Muhlenberg's ordination service? All right, there it is. There's this ordination certificate that was handed to him, given to him to become the assistant pastor, the deacon in Groß-Hennersdorf. He stood in that pulpit preaching at least once or twice a month. He administered the orphanage of Henrietta Sophia von Gersdorf. For 3 years he did it. And then, and I know this is a new concept for all of us, there was a little downsizing in Groß-Hennersdorf. The Countess had overextended her funding, and so she had to sell the estate to a cousin. And there was downsizing. It was his salary, not his job description. And he didn't like that. So he went back to Halle, he went back to Franke, and they're sitting at dinner on his 30th birthday, September 6, 1741. And Franke looks up and says to him, Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania. So where did the idea come from? Well, it came from a request of Lutherans in the Delaware Valley, a congregation in Philadelphia called St. Michael's, a congregation out in Trapp, and a congregation in New Providence. They came together. They signed a letter and said, send us a pastor, we'll pay him. And there it was. The first letter arrived in 1733. This was Franke's response in 1739. Muhlenberg finally gets sent in 1741. Okay, there's precedent here. We move at the speed of a glacier, okay? All right? Point number one, we move at the speed of a glacier. And so Muhlenberg left Europe. He probably figured it was for good. Said farewell to his mother, to his brothers and sisters, and he went to London, where he was trained for 2 months by the court chaplain, Friedrich Michael Ziegenhagen, who taught him English, and then how life would play out for Lutheran congregations, German Lutheran congregations in English North America. And then after that, he set sail. This is the amazing ship that he traveled on from London to Charleston, South Carolina. It had 10 guns, 2 masts, a crew of 7, and that was it. It carried more cargo than passengers. And the captain didn't even think it was going to make it. So there it is. This is the ship. And where did Muhlenberg spend most of that time? Hanging over the rail or lying in the hammock because he was seasick. From the very beginning, 3 months. And there are 3 stages of seasickness. The first is you feel a little discomfort. The second stage is you're afraid you're going to die. The third stage is you're afraid you're going to live. And so it is. He set sail, heading down off the coast of France and Spain because they had to pick up the westerlies so that they could cross the Atlantic. And there he is in his journals, keeping tab, longitude, latitude. He loved it, although he didn't like the seasickness. Landed in Charleston, South Carolina, and then took a sloop from Charleston to Philadelphia, 2 weeks. Again, hanging over the rail, seasick. There he is, arriving, coming up the East Coast, coming to the city of brotherly love on November 25th, 1742. How many people were there at the dock to greet him when his boat docked at 8 a.m. in the morning? How many people knew that he was coming? There you have it. Precedent number 2. There are some mess-ups when it comes to administration. Okay? So if there is a cross between synod and your call and other things, we have colonial precedent for some mishaps here. And the first letter of Muhlenberg back to Franke and Ziegenhagen asked the question, why didn't anybody write a letter to tell them I was coming, that I was on my way? It's another question we'll ask the Almighty when we get there. And so Muhlenberg sets out, and as you work with his career over decades, you see him maturing in terms of administration, getting a grip on how we will pull congregations together and be the people of God in this new setting. And so throughout the 1740s, what is he concerned about? Organizing the congregations and building churches. This is the brick and mortar phase. There he is, and how does he get about? He gets about on horseback. And he is on horseback and out and about more times than he is at home and in the parsonage. He is out finding the people of God, and then he sets out to build the churches. This is the first one that was finished, Augustus Lutheran in Trapp, Pennsylvania, dedicated in 1745. This was his first church. The farmers themselves started dragging the logs and the stones to this site the first winter of 1742 because they were so excited that they finally had a pastor. This is New Hanover. The log building is the schoolhouse, and then in the 1760s they finally constructed their stone church that still stands there today. This is St. Michael's Lutheran in Philadelphia, not Germantown. This is the congregation that took 5 years to construct. It had seating for 600 people. They were meeting in the church in 1751 with no windows in place. Before the pastor could preach, he had to wipe the snow off the Bible so he could read the passage from which they would preach. But they were excited. They had little, they didn't have a great deal, but they were excited because they were the people of God here in the city of Philadelphia. This is St. Michael's, a photograph shortly before it was pulled down in 1818. This was the last 1871, 1872. It was taken down. Why? It had served its purpose. Precedent number 3, the church is not a museum. They needed a better building, a different building in a different place. This had served its time. It was time to say goodbye. The church is not a museum. It's the living people of God. This is Zion. This is the model of Zion Lutheran Church. Zion, this is before its destruction in 1869. This had seating for 2,500. You could get 3,000 in there if they held their breath. That's what they claimed. When George Washington, the memorial service was convened by Congress, the Congressional Memorial Service for George Washington, it was in there. In Zion Lutheran Church where everyone met because everyone was guaranteed a seat. So here we are, 1748, we're becoming the administrator. We're trying to think of how we can do this. So he creates a ministerium. He pulls all the pastors together. He pulls elected leaders together. And the first thing he decides is we're going to do the liturgy together. We're going to come up with one liturgy so that we're unified in this. Okay? So he tells Europe, this is the liturgy we're using of St. Mary's Church in London. And this is what we're doing. Well, not really. But that's what he told them what they wanted to hear. When they were commissioned and licensed by the ministerium, they sat down, they were given blank pieces of paper, a pen, an inkwell, and they wrote out the liturgy. Why didn't they have it printed? They could have had it printed for a few bucks. It was no big deal. What they were trying to, this is very clever on their part. They don't want the runaways, the imposters, to get a hold of this. So they had only a person who is authorized by the ministerium to be the preaching and administering the sacraments in the congregations. That's the person who has the liturgy. And if they had printed it, there would have been copies out. The people who said, oh, I'm a shoemaker, I can read, I can be your pastor. I was defrocked in Europe, don't worry about that. I can be your pastor, I can lead you. They could have copies of the printed liturgy. Nah, Muhlenberg was being very clever. He was keeping it tight so that you knew this was a respected, licensed preacher, one to administer the sacraments. He also didn't have it printed because I think he didn't want to have a copy sent back to Europe, which would show them that they weren't using the Savoy liturgy, the Lutheran liturgy in London. That they weren't doing. The English side will be the Book of Common Prayer. They will write out parts of the Book of Common Prayer, and that's what they will use when they're doing this bilingual ministry of German and English. The 1750s were a time of congregational upset. It was St. Michael's in Germantown that took care of that. Muhlenberg got challenged by a baker by the name of Bayerle, because Muhlenberg wanted to appoint the pastor, and Bayerle said, no, I'm an elected individual, I'll appoint the pastor. And so it went back and forth and ended up in court because the parties were locking each other out of church. So there's another precedent. We come from a group of people that will argue, and we will take those arguments very seriously, okay? So there we have another precedent. But then Muhlenberg matures, and there is the maturation of the individual. On October 18, 1762, he stands in St. Michael's Lutheran Church on a Monday, and he reads to them this document that is underneath in a vault below my feet. It is the constitution for that congregation. And what he basically says, and he outlines in a preamble and 3 articles, he says, people of God, elected officers, clergy, and ministerium make up church. We're going to work on this all together. One cannot do it without the others. So, 14 years before the founding forces stood in Independence Hall to sign a Declaration of Independence, Muhlenberg handed out a Declaration of Dependence. And then immigrants lined up, and they signed their names to that Constitution. And there's Henry Muhlenberg. And it wasn't closed and put on a shelf to gather dust. It comes out again and again. And when you look at the signatures, you begin to realize that everybody who joined that congregation had to sign that book. So here's Schulze, who comes as the assistant pastor. He has to sign the Constitution in 65 because he wasn't there yet in 62. There's Kunze, who arrives in 70. So this was a living document that was used time and time again, pulled out, signed, and affirmed and reaffirmed, because all of this, congregation, clergy, elected officers, ministerium, would work together to be church. And there we have this wonderful document. 14 years before everyone else was signing documents, there it is, the 18th of October, 1762. So here's Henry Melchior Muhlenberg moving out, building the church, bringing them together. And this is the trickle-over theory. Halle sent individuals trained from Germany here. And in the 40 years that they did it, 13 arrived. This is the original trickle-over theory. There weren't a whole lot of people coming, but they did their best. They did their best. And so they worked together, and established church. The 1770s, 1776. This is a tombstone in my home parish, St. Peter's in Chester Springs. Valentin Orner. He rode over the Schuylkill, he crossed the Schuylkill River with 2 horses in 1776 to pick up Muhlenberg. to bring him to Pikeland, which is now Chester Springs. And as they're crossing and heading out over the Schuylkill River through Chester County, Valentine Orner turns to Henry Malcolm Muhlenberg and says, "Do you know who I am?" How many times are we going to hear that? "Do you know who I am?" over our lifetime? And Muhlenberg is sitting there going, "Don't really know who you are." And Valentine Orner turned to him and said, "I am the first baby you baptized in the winter of 1743 in the barn in Trapp." It's the most beautiful entry in the journals, because Muhlenberg's piety wouldn't let him finish the sentence, but I know what he's thinking. He was proud because he had made a difference. Because he said, here is Valentine Orner. He's married, father of 4 children, and a deacon in the church. And I can just feel the pride and the joy and the delight that Muhlenberg is there below the textual surface of that entry, because he realized he had made a difference. Then he enters his retirement in the 1780s, and he spends some time doing some publishing. He finally has that sabbatical time that he needs to do the writing, and so he writes the preface for the hymnal that's released in 1786. And brothers and sisters in Christ, this group was smart. This group was smart. That is clever. That is clever. Because the Halle trained pastors were always accused of not really being Lutheran, because Halle had no connection with Luther. None whatsoever. But the pastors knew it did. And it's written down below in German. See, Luther was in Halle. He died in Eisleben. And in order to get back to Wittenberg, the funeral train went through Halle. And they made the death mask there in Halle. And from that death mask, they had this etching, this engraving made of Luther. So they were proving to individuals that there was a connection between Luther, Halle, and the Halle trained pastors. It might not be a living connection, but it's a connection, so be it. So there it is. Very clever of them. This group was clever. And then they had the printed liturgy. They finally did what they should have done earlier, but they decided not to. They printed the liturgy. So Henry Malcolm Muhlenberg matures in terms of administration. Instead of seeing church as institution in terms of one location, he creates a network by giving it a liturgy, by giving it a hymnal, and a model constitution. So the people of God can move with the expanding frontier and be church wherever, and then come back and relate to the ministerium in this agreement of signing this constitution. That's brilliant. That's good. But there's one thing missing in all of this. We don't have a school. So what do? All right. This is another document that's in the basement of this building. It's a 1749 agreement of sale. And what it says is, Henry Muhlenberg is purchasing land for the building of seminary. And there it is. He knew he needed a seminary. He knew he needed a hospital. He wanted that. He wanted a school. He wanted it in 1749. He bought the land. And there's the signature of Henry Muhlenberg and his wife, Mary Muhlenberg, because he's using her dowry to buy the land. So there it is. The land had to be sold because it didn't work. And so what did they do to train? What did they do to train pastors? Long before this seminary came up with the co-op model, they came up with a co-op model. They took individuals, gave them books, put them in parishes, and then trained them when they came to ministerial meetings, and they worked it out. That's co-op. And the first one admitted into the program was Jacob von Buskirch. And so he was born in Hackensack, New Jersey, and he speaks Dutch, so they train him to speak German, so he can preach in Dutch, English, and German. And then as I'm cataloging in the library one afternoon last summer, here's a book that was his. He signed it. So there it is. Jacob Buskirch, his book, 1756. He's in the co-op program. But you know what's amazing? You all can read that page. It's not in German. It's in English. This was going to be a bilingual church right from the get-go. This was going to be a church that moved forward with all the languages. Then we had a seminarium. We were delighted. Kunzes founded a seminary in Philadelphia. Unfortunately, when the Brits arrived in 1776, it closed down. And they went back to the co-op model. But they had 13 students, and they were proud of that achievement because they knew they needed a school. They knew they needed a school in order to make this work. And they finally got a school. Gettysburg Seminary, 1826, 11 students. And why in Gettysburg? Because it's logical. You look at the Lutheran settlements, the settlement pattern of Lutherans in 1826, Gettysburg is right in the middle. It makes absolutely logical sense. Why is there a seminary in 1830 in South Carolina, in Columbia, South Carolina? Because that's where Lutherans are settled. Lenore Ryan College, why is it there? Because that's where Lutherans settled. Why is there a College Roanoke in Virginia? That's where Lutherans settled. So all of these places here, there's Columbia, South Carolina, Lenore Ryan, Gettysburg is located there, and you've got your Roanoke College. So all of this is the Lutheran settlements and the Lutheran pattern. So Gettysburg made phenomenal sense. Here we are. But here's the problem. Here's the need. Every year when the river thawed out, the Delaware River thawed out, more immigrants showed up, bringing with them their faith, their Lutheran faith, hoping to transplant it on this side of the ocean. And there just weren't enough pastors. So they were struggling. Look at the statistics on decades of people arriving from German-speaking territories, carrying their Lutheran faith. They couldn't keep up. In the 1850s, this is where Lutherans were settled. Columbus, Ohio makes phenomenal sense to build a seminary. Gettysburg is working, but it's too far, it's a little bit too remote at this point. And then in 1857, they only had 2 graduates. We need leaders. We need leaders. And then there was the issue of identity. Samuel Simon Schmucker. Each of us who teaches Lutheranism in North America know this individual very well. He was the one who decided to say, well, in the definite platform, we need to remove some of the Catholic elements that are still hanging around in some of the confessions. Let's do away with real presence. Let's do away with confession absolution. Let's do this. I understand what he's doing. He's hoping to fit Lutheranism more comfortably in the American Protestant churchscape. He's writing this in the 1850s. In the 1840s, in the city of Philadelphia, there were riots against Roman Catholics. People were killed. St. Augustine's church was burned to the ground. The know-nothings had the power. Xenophobia was reigning in colonial America, and he's trying to figure it out. He's a Grenzgestalt. He lives in 2 worlds simultaneously, and he doesn't have a primer. He doesn't have a handbook that says, this is what you do, this is how to succeed, this is what will work. There it is. And so there was this issue that was also nagging at them. And they wanted a school that had an identity for the confessions that would honor them. And so the ministerium sent Charles F. Schaeffer to be the professor of German and theology at Gettysburg Seminary. Where did he come from? Where did he get his identity? He got it from his dad. He was another person that went through the Muhlenberg co-op model. All of his dad's books are in the rare book room of the Krauth Memorial Library, and I am going through them systematically, finding them. All of the books that his father brought with him, he gave to his son, and this is how he learned his Lutheranism, from these books. And I can read his marginal notes and see him learning. There it is, Charles F. Schaeffer. But he gave up in 1863. He said enough was enough. And so finally the ministerium of Pennsylvania decided in 1864 we need a seminary here in Philadelphia. We need one here. We have to do something. Gettysburg is remote. It's becoming too expensive. We need another seminary to train up leaders to be with the people of God. Charles F. Schaeffer showed up in the summer of 1864. How many people knew that he was on his way? How many people were prepared for his arrival when he pulled up in a wagon with his books and furniture and family? There it is. So then what the ministerium sat down and in July said, this is what we're going to do. We're going to open a seminary. Okay, we're going to have an induction of the professors on October 4th, and then we're going to start classes on October 5th. There it is. All right, there they are. There they are, some of them. If you ask them what were some of the issues, they'll say it's doctrine, it's language, liturgical renewal, location. It's been said time and time again, all of it's true. All of it's true. It's there. So for seminary education, the ministerium had in its budget Budget. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? What's in the budget line? Of 77 congregations in the ministerium with 12,000 members, they had received nothing for seminary education. For the 60 congregations with 13,000 members, they received the astonishing amount of $70.50. All right, so on a wing and a prayer, we're going to make this happen. And we did. So let's hear them speak. Let's have them tell us what they thought about a school in Philadelphia. Not secondhand, but firsthand from a newspaper that was printed 1 month before the school actually got started. Let's hear what they said about starting a school. Well, they said, here we are. We are going to be a school, and we're going to provide financial aid for students. I think that's the Leadership Fund. That was one of their visions. That was one of their goals. Students of any Christian church may be received into the theological seminary. They were ecumenical before we knew it. They were out there saying, we are going to accept anybody from any Christian tradition into this school. And we're going to see that there are cheap and economical boarding arrangements. We're going to make this work. These are the people who established this school speaking to us directly. There will be employment opportunities in the city of Philadelphia. You can find a job in addition to attending classes. You can be a part-time student. You can go out and make this happen. So here it is. September 15th, 1864. And because of the number of churches, home missions, prisons, benevolent societies, we can arrange field education. So you can practice what you're learning in the classroom. And this will be something cool. This will be good. It will be theory and practice merged. And it will be in both German and English churches. We will once again be the bilingual church we wanted to be. We're going to be multicultural. We'll affirm it. The great Philadelphia libraries. There they are. We will have access to them. And you do. Southeastern Pennsylvania Theological Library Association, a union of 20 libraries, starting with New Brunswick and New Jersey and ending with Gettysburg Lutheran, all together under that SEPLA, Southeastern Pennsylvania Theological Library Association, with reciprocal borrowing privileges. They understood it in 1864, and we are living into it. There would be additional educational opportunities, the University of Pennsylvania, the other schools. You can broaden your horizons. All of that is here. And then there will be pastoral opportunities and the arts. You can come and enjoy the arts. This was their vision for this school in September 1864. And the city, why? Our Lord made the great city of his land the center of his kingdom. His apostles made great cities their centers, and experience has shown in our land that none but seminaries in great cities or of very easy access to them have reached the highest efficiency. So there it is, the city. But not everybody was thrilled with the idea of a seminary in Philadelphia. And here's the response. Theological seminaries in cities have been failures. Okay, we disprove that theory. And then it says, all the talk about libraries, lectures, and preaching in great cities is mere twaddle. All right, there it is. We fought fierce. There's precedent here. And then there was also the issue of temptation. I know. I figured you should enjoy this as well. Why should I be the only person who sees this in the dusty basement of the library? You should enjoy what they were talking about. Because men can be tempted in the large cities. There it is. And so there it is. But their response was very, very interesting to a large extent. In small towns, the sole relief from study is in visiting the ladies, which, important and happy in its influence as it is, may be out of proportion and lead to too early engagements. There it is. There it is. What can I say? Charles Porterfield Krauth then concluded with this. The grace of God. The grace of God, which is easily obtained here as at Gettysburg, would keep them unspotted from the world. There you have it. So there we are. So on September 8th, 1864, in the Lutheran and the Observer, they listed the courses that would be offered. And this is very interesting. The right column, the left-hand column will be German, the right-hand column will be English. So here's what Charles F. Schaeffer will be teaching both in German and in English. Here's what William Julius Mann is going to be teaching in German, and then the complaint was we would like to also hear him in English, so they sketched in a few things that he would do in terms of English, meaning the Book of Concord, Ethics, and Liturgies. But notice this. Notice the address. Watch this. Charles Porterfield Krauth, North 42nd, number 42, North 9th Street. He's teaching only in English. He can read German, but he can't speak it. Schaefer, we don't have an address for him. And then Krauth, 1703 Green Street. We still don't know where we're going to start the classes. We don't know where we're going to hold the classes, and they're giving the residential addresses of the faculty because the students may have to go to the homes of the faculty in order to receive the instruction. There it was. But it was finally resolved. So number 42 North 9th Street on October 5th, 1864, in the back room of the second floor, 11 students were there, and William Julius Mann walked in, and he started to lecture. 11 students at Gettysburg, 11 students started at Philadelphia. Number 11 seems to be a good thing. If we start with 11, there's precedent that this is going to move forward. What's in the first, what's in the, this front room? Why weren't they in the front room? That was Krauth's study on the second floor. They were faithful. Everything they printed in English, they printed in German. They were bilingual for up until 1910. Everything that was taught in English had to be taught in German. Everything that was published in English was published in German. St. Michael Zion, the congregation in Center City, Philadelphia, just as they were pulling down the buildings, gave the seminary $5,000, the piece of land where they could construct a dormitory for 60 students. It was too small. And so they had to come out to Mount Airy. Here, this spot where colonial history was made. For this was the summer home of Chief Justice William Allen, for whom Allen's Lane and Allentown is named. That is his summer home. And that's where he would reside when he was tired of the heat of the city of Philadelphia. And there's the Chief Justice William Allen in one of the vaults that only I get into. That's one of the paintings of Chief Justice William Allen. And there he is in all his glory. He was a Tory. He had to move out very quickly, get to London for a while, but then he came back in 1779, and then he died 1 year later. There's his house. It became a French school for a while, and then it became a military academy. You see that, what looks like a picket fence on the porch? That's actually little cadets lined up in their uniforms, and they're waiting to be marched off to church, Mount Airy Presbyterian Church. So what we think was a fence was actually the little cadets there. And this was run by General Rumford, who conducted a military academy, and Generals Beauregard and Meade were raised up here and then sent to West Point, and they became the generals in the Civil War. So here is the land that they came to. They took down the estate house. The Gowan family did that, and they put up their house a little further back from Germantown Avenue because it was too close, it was too dusty, it was too dirty. So they put up the Gowan Mansion, and there it is in all its glory with a great grand porch that was around it. And William Julius Mann had this to say in the 25th anniversary, and it is very striking what he had to say to the faculty at that day. During all that time, and under many trying circumstances, the harmony and mutual goodwill of the members of the faculty was never disturbed in any way. And at present time, and for years I may say, the faculty without exception have been one mind, one heart, one soul. There he is, the person who delivered the first lecture on October 5th, 1864. They came out here because the dormitory was too small, there was no refectory, and the students kept ending up in the pubs. And it didn't look good. Truth be told, there it is. They were also going to the theater, and then also, they were subject to the epidemics that plagued Philadelphia. This man in 1 year during the cholera season will have 271 funerals in 12 months. They knew what it was, why they were there. So here we have it. This was the dormitory. This is the facade is still out there. This was what was dedicated on October 4th, 1889. Seminary Day is October 4th, 1889. Why? The Battle of Germantown began on Chief Justice William Allen's porch, where those little cadets were lined up on October 4th, 1777. Seminary started inducted as faculty on October 4th, 1864. They dedicated the dormitory on October 4th, 1889. Ah, there it is. There is no place so well adapted to the needs of the seminary as Philadelphia. With its many Lutheran churches, its active congregational work, and its large, numerous libraries. And though we are at present removed from the central portion of the city, the time will come when this broad city of homes will reach beyond Mount Airy and will cluster all around the seminary grounds. There it was. They knew what was coming. They knew what would happen. The seminary is transplanted, said Theodor Schmalk. The old was the student's purgatory. The new is the student's paradise. And he spelled this out. I'm not speaking of the midnight glitter along 8th and 9th and Race and Vine Streets. I am not talking about the alluring haunts of the kings and queens of the demi-monde, nor of the gay promenades and fashion windows and illustrated newsstands and baseball scores and multitudinous sights along Chestnut Street. That's not what I am talking about. What I am talking about when I say it was the student's purgatory was the burning heat, the bitter frosty chills, the foul air, the dingy rooms, the clouds of dust, the intolerable clutter, the intolerable noise of coal wagons, horses' hooves, rambling trolley cars. They worked up the nervous system. But now we are here at Mount Airy. Luxury of steam heat, a daily bath in porcelain-lined tubs, the perfect rest at night on mattresses of felt. The appointments here are palatial. Wow. Imagine what he would have seen had he had glasses. And there they are, the students in the seminary in the early part of 1904 under gas lamps in a room studying. And things had changed. By 1889, when they came out here, the fight between Gettysburg and Philadelphia was forgotten. It was all over. Everybody had made up. The major players were all dead. All of these people were gone. They were excited about a new hymnal, the 1888 hymnal. They were so thrilled about liturgical renewal. They were so thrilled about working together. Time and time again, we have to realize that by 1889, it was over. It was done. We were moving on and we were in a new chapter. And here they were on October 4th, 1889, and had they succeeded at the 25th anniversary, they had 321 graduates between those years. They thought they saw the success, and they started out with $70.50. This does the librarian's heart good. This is the library. On the third floor of Hagen, there it was. The 25,000 volumes were crammed on the third floor of Hagen, and there it stayed until they built the Krauth Memorial Library, dedicated it in June 3rd, 1908. We still are building and rebuilding. Right under your feet is the compact storage for the Krauth Memorial Library, and 47,000 volumes are there. We maintain a library because this was in our vision statement right from the very beginning. And so there are 47,000 volumes that are here for your use. We won't get rid of them. We committed to this, to being the top, to staying on target. And so under your feet are the compact shelving that hold all of these volumes. These are the number of graduates that we claim proudly. 1889, we had 350. 1905, there were 600. And as of June 2014, 5,058. You are the future. And we are here because of them, and we are doing the work that they set out. To be ecumenical, to be multicultural, to be city and urban oriented. That was all spelled out a long time ago. So, when Henry Melchior Muhlenberg arrived on November 25th, 1742, who was there to meet him? When Charles Frederick Schaeffer pulled in from Gettysburg with furniture and books, who was there who knew he was coming? On August 25th, 2014, when you arrived, who was there to greet you? There you are. There you are. Oh, it was all of these things. But here's my interpretation. If you sum this all up, why? Because we need to train leaders for service. Word and service, word and sacrament. That was what Muhlenberg spelled out in 1749 when he took his wife's dowry and he bought a piece of land. He knew we needed a school in order to allow people to live, to be the people of God here in this place. And so it is. And when they came to this seminary, an individual by the name of Gerberdink wrote a 13-stanza hymn. I picked out this stanza and edited out some of the patriarchal overtones that filled the whole thing. And when you do the meter, it comes to crown him with many crowns. And thus send forth, O school, the saints of God approved. Fight rightly to divide the word by fear or shame unmoved. Saints to discern the times with comprehensive view, to see the vastness of the work God gives the church to do. Perfection always eludes me. It's supposed to be vastness of the work God gives us to do. Ah, well, it's those late hours. The D and the K on the keyboard, there it is. So there it is, the 1889 vision of this school. How is it summed up today? God's work, our hands. So there it is, Scola Transplantanda. A Middle English word that was cobbled together and put together with a word that was cobbled by Henry Melchior Muhlenberg about it must be transplanted. We're still trying to figure out how to translate that word. So what am I saying with Scola Transplantanda? It was never an exact transplant. It was always a hybrid. It was always adapting. It was always evolving and changing. So it could be the school that it needed to be for the people of God whenever. In the 19th century, in the 20th century, and now in the 21st century. Thank you for your attention. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.